Thank you, Nicole. And good evening, everybody. My name is Leonard Somarriba. I'm a doctor of physical therapy and co-CEO of ProFysio Physical Therapy. And I'm joined this evening by my esteemed colleague, clinical director of operations in our East Brunswick location, as well as doctor of physical therapy, Dr. Nichole Chaviano. It's our pleasure to have you with us this evening for our presentation, Successful Remote Learning, Workstation Setup, Stress Management, and Exercise. Just a few housekeeping items. Please note this presentation is being recorded. We will rebroadcast it on Facebook, and we'll also post it to our YouTube page. So please follow us on YouTube and subscribe to see some of our other videos as well. That way it can be a great reference for you. As far as questions, we're saving plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. We ask that at any moment, if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature and go ahead and type your question in so that you don't forget your question. And at the end of the presentation, we'll go through and answer all of them. You also have the option to speak your question in if you'd prefer to do it that way as opposed to typing it in. If you use the raise your hand feature, we'll see that and we'll be able to enable your audio, and then you can speak your question in. So a little bit about myself, then allow Nicole to introduce herself as well. We'll get started with the presentation. So again, my name is Dr. Leonard Somarriba. I'm a doctor of physical therapy and co-CEO of ProFysio Physical Therapy since 2013. I started my career in 2006 with a focus and emphasis on outpatient orthopedic physical therapy. I started the practice in 2013 with my best friend, Dr. John Scafidi. We felt as though in PT, like in a lot of healthcare settings, it was very much a volume-based model where it was a lot about how many patients you were seeing, and we didn't believe in that. We felt like there was a better way to do it, and so we've really built the practice as a quality-first model where we deliver clinical excellence and unmatched customer service, really to provide an optimal rehab experience for every patient. And obviously something that we're very proud of. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Nicole. She'll introduce herself and then get started with some of the content of the presentation.
Hi, so like Dr. Lenny said, I'm Dr. Nichole Chaviano. I'm the clinical director of East Brunswick, but I am a physical therapist first and foremost. So I'm still treating patients and I'm doing all of that fun stuff too that we all enjoy to do. So I've been with the company about 4 years now after working in various practices and kind of seeing what was out there and what we were looking at, and really coming here to be able to treat patients in that quality model, being able to spend time and really using our education in the right way and to individually treat patients and find those care paths that work best for them. So I will say doing this presentation was fun. I hear from a lot of patients that are both students and parents, grandparents, a lot of concerns that are coming up this year. So I think it's really important that, you know, we synthesize a lot of information that's out there. By no means are we, you know, saying one way or the other whether remote learning or hybrid learning is the right answer. It's really just the situation we're faced with. So I think it's important to kind of go through all of the information, give you as much information as possible. And then at the end, I have a ton of links for you guys, either, you know, for equipment that you can purchase, none of which we are selling. It's all just stuff that I've found through different avenues, as well as just other resources for you to look through and get some more information. So I'm just going to read through some of the learning objectives. Like I said, it's really comprehensive. We kind of went top to bottom with this. So we're going to discuss all of the different types of distance learning, working on some scheduling, and then talk about the effects of isolation and maintaining relationships for your children and for yourselves while we're still in this quarantine state that we're in. Some workplace setup, of course, exercise, working on some fine motor skills, some spatial relationships, backpack safety. I know kids are bringing Chromebooks and all of these things back and forth, so that's important as well. Some nutrition information, some sleep, and then we're going to discuss mindfulness and stress reduction strategies. So we'll start right away with understanding the differences in the types of distance learning. So I think this is important because it gives you some more information about the verbiage that the schools might be using, as well as gives you some more information as to how to search for the type of learning that your student might be doing. So there are a couple of different types of distance learning. Online is something that's usually offered at higher levels, so in college level courses. This is something that might have been done in the spring when things were just kind of getting thrown together. They were putting some information into a server, and then your students were watching them either at their leisure at that time and then submitting things afterwards. This is done where most of the instruction is done via video, it's not live action, and then the instruction is really coming from the family or the students themselves. So then hybrid learning is something that's might be new to most folks, where we're spending some days in school, maybe a half day in school, but some of the learning is done online, some of it is done in a traditional classroom setting. This can mean that students are meeting up with teachers either individually via Zoom calls, Google Meets, that type of stuff, or they're doing live action classes while the entire class is involved or part of the class is involved, and then they're spending part of the day or part of the week in actual school buildings. Then there's conference classes. So this is the break off of that hybrid or online version where they're meeting as a class online, or they're meeting in small groups online. It's happening in real time, and it could be one-to-one, it could be small groups, or it could be the class, and they're using phones or video chats. They're able to engage in those live lessons despite the distance, which is, I think, what a lot of the schools are really aiming for at this point compared to what happened in the spring. It does allow for a lot more interaction with the teachers and abilities to ask questions in real time and receive learning in what we would consider the most normal way for most students, where they're interacting and receiving question and answer right away. And then correspondence is usually done when, access to technology is not quite there. We're putting together packets or handouts. The students are receiving those, and then they're handing those back in. It can be done via email. It could be done with pickup. I know a lot of schools did that in the spring, especially for the younger grades where the technology wasn't necessarily there, or they were used to learning on pen and paper, or even this might be just some adjunct to their online or their conference classes. So just want to get a feel for the panel today and see kind of where everybody's at. Are your schools doing all online? Are they doing all in person? And then if they are doing hybrids, are they doing hybrids half days where they're in school for part of the day and then come home and have to do online in the afternoon, or vice versa? Or are they doing, Monday, Tuesday in school and then Thursday, Friday at home, something like that?
Great. So I just launched the poll. So what type of learning is your school starting the year with? And we'll wait for everybody to answer in. Okay, great. It looks like we are 50% of the room is all online, and 50% is hybrid half day. Okay, awesome.
So that just gives us some insight into exactly where everyone's at, and then where we're looking forward into this. So obviously, it's easy for us to look at the disadvantages, right? It's challenging. We're being faced with things that really we never thought we were going to see, nevertheless have to do now for the second term or second marking period or whatever's going on with your children. So it's easy to look at the list of disadvantages and get caught up in them. It's just human nature. We're all in these weird situations, but I think it's really important that we take those negatives, find some advantages, and find a silver lining. As therapists, it's something we do every day. So we're used to hearing, what's wrong, what hurts, what you can't do, but we have to take those day by day and say, hey, it's a little bit better than yesterday, or we're able to do these things that I wasn't able to do a week ago. So finding those little victories throughout this process, I think, is going to be really important for students and for parents. It's discouraging for a lot of folks to have to be in a situation where you're uncomfortable, but taking some of these advantages, we're not dealing with having to worry about weather or health concerns with your children. There's a lot more flexibility for students, if they need a little bit of extra time with the teachers or with their parents to learn content, they have that now. It's not just being forced at them in the confines of the traditional school day, and then they move on the next day. And it's really an opportunity to bond with families. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from family members who have said, I really didn't know how bright my kid was, and I really didn't get to spend this much time with them ever and see their growth and see their development in day by day, where they're in school most of the time. You're getting home and you're rushing to soccer practice or whatever the next thing is, trying to get dinner on the table. And so you really get to spend a lot of time learning your kids and understanding your kids and really getting them onto the next step and being a part of that. Of course, we have to look at the disadvantages. The biggest one, and you're hearing a lot about it, is access to technology. I think a lot of the school districts have done a great job with providing some sort of tablets or computers hotspots, things like that. But unfortunately, you know, when we're dealing with some of the lower income districts or some districts that don't have the funding, we're dealing with a little bit of that disparity in technology access. So we have to consider that and think of ways around that. Obviously, the dangers of the internet, we want to make sure the kids are not just, you know, clicking through YouTube and all of a sudden end up somewhere that they're not supposed to. Obviously, falsifying work. This is something that needs to be checked in on, I would say, by the parents more than anything else. But I think the teachers and the professors and all of the administration have done a better job with understanding how work is getting done. Obviously, increased screen time and decreased socialization with their peers. These are things that we're going to discuss and ways that we are going to be able to improve on them and move forward and have some growth in those. I do want to talk about, since we do have a good amount of folks doing hybrid learning, ways to transition with those hybrids. So if they're doing half day in, and then they're coming home and they're going back to school online, or if they're doing one day in, one day out, I think it's most important that you base it on your child's abilities and their age and their ability to transition from one task to the next. You know, there's a reason kids have recess. There's a reason we let them have an after school snack and run around before they do homework. Treat it like that. Be available to help them and be available to kind of help them transition, especially in the first few weeks while they're learning their new schedules. But it is important to have routine and separate workspaces and make it very much the same for them so that it doesn't feel like it's a disjointed day between going to school and coming home. But of course, like I said, based on your child's needs. So if your child needs to run a bunch of laps in the backyard before they can sit back down on the computer, great. If they need to do something mindless and color and play with blocks or whatever it might be for their age range, let them do that. I mean, there's no right way and there's no wrong way at this point. It's really all about you, your needs, and your child's needs. So some great strategies that we've definitely seen from parents and from reading a lot of information is that, you know, using timers for that break to say, okay, you get home at 12, you have to log back on at 2. So you have an hour of free time and put a timer on. Now you're not the bad guy saying, hey, you have to go back to school. It's the timer and that's what it is. And if that works for your kids, great. It might be that they have to jump right back into it and log back on, or else you've lost them for the day. And it might be that you do some of that hands-on learning in between that time schedule just to get them back going. So play with be flexible, first of all, but also test your kids and see what they tolerate and see what they're comfortable with, and understand that every day is not going to be the same, but try to make it as routine as possible for them. So we're going to talk about some tips for success for all of those daunting disadvantages that we were looking at. So kids and even adults, really, we thrive on routines and schedules. It's extremely important for children at school age, and it's no different when they're doing homeschool. So they function their best when they're able to maintain their routine as close to normal as possible. We'll spend some time focusing later on the importance of sleep, but in the sense, focus on setting alarms similar to the times that they would encounter on those school days in order to get them up and get them going, even if it's not a true school day. Around lunchtime, encourage them to get up, get some fresh air, go for a walk, a bike ride. Make sure they're having snacks when they would normally have snacks. And make sure they're not sedentary in front of the computer all day. It's not great for us as adults. It's definitely not great for them as children. You want to try to prepare healthy meals. You want to avoid caffeine and sugary drinks late in the day to make sure that their sleep cycles are appropriate. And then unless it's age appropriate, you really don't want to allow naps for more than 15 to 20 minutes a day. It breaks up their day, it affects their sleep cycles, and it's just a bad routine to get into, especially with the perspective of going back to school full time at some point. So this is one of the resources I found. I think it's really cool, like downloadable template. I found it on Etsy. I linked it for you later. It's actually teachers have put together these schedules. You can download them with your child's name and their information. You can do week by week, you can do day by day, and it gives them some semblance of understanding what the expectations for that time frame are, their times, and then you know, evening free time and whatever you're allowing them to do with their free time. So I thought this was a really great example of just something simple to be done. You can make them yourself if you're crafty or handy. I think this was like $4 or $5 for a month's worth. So something, you know, couple of options for you, but just some really cool little resources. So I do think it's important to understand why this learning is so important, especially for these younger kids. So whether they're learning in school, online, in a blended environment, the brain is really the biggest organ of learning, right? So online learning should remember that cognition and emotions are highly intertwined. And both the brain in everyday lived experiences and their school environments, they want to learn, but we have to reimagine the environments for them. We have to think of ways to make it successful in order for them to feel like they're going to accomplish something. If we're negative, their learning experience will be negative. Also, there's a lot of new research that shows that in order to facilitate quality learning, deep learning, and metacognition of material, so that secondary learning structures, they have to have longer class times, but then the problem is the online class times can't be longer because we lose focus. So there's a lot of structural issues in creating these online classes and these online structures for children. And, you know, we're talking children and adolescents because it's just not the way their brains are structured to learn. So being patient with that. It is important that the teachers are creating like high quality, very direct interaction in order to guide the learning and keep the students on tasks, along with time away from the screen in order for them to practice, create, read, explore their reimagined homework. It's not going to be the sit down with a paper and pencil that they got sent home in their backpacks like it was last year. It definitely has to be different. So definitely, you know, expect what you saw in the spring to be different from now entering the fall. Teachers have had a lot more time to plan. Districts are able to facilitate more learning based on feedback from both parents and families, students, as well as themselves, and creating these new structures. So I do want to talk about screen time. So screen time is this big, scary term where everybody's saying, you know, we're afraid of too much screen time for the children. We don't want them on tablets and computers and iPhones and all of the things that they have, and even their games are really screen-based at this point, and now we're adding learning in that way. So we just have to be very specific and understand that you want to limit the amount of screen time outside of school time, but be flexible with yourself. If you've got to make dinner and the only way you're going to be able to do that, or if you have to work and the only way you're going to be able to do that is letting them watch some TV, well, guess what? That's just what's going to happen today. Or on the other end of it, hey, my kid really enjoys coloring and blocks and Play-Doh. If I can do that kind of stuff instead of popping them in front of the tablet, that's great too. So be flexible with yourself, but understand that overuse of screen time really adversely impacts their young brain. So it's important to mix it up. You want to use the screen as some sort of breaks, you can. And if you don't, then don't. But understand that there are other mediums. There are other options, online resources, there's flashcards. Many bookstores are actually selling additional learning tools at pretty nominal costs. So that's an option, as well as printing some of their schoolwork, asking for textbooks, using physical activities or fine motor activities to engage their brains without really engaging their eye structures with the screen time. So there are a couple articles that I'm going to reference, and again, I'm going to put them up at the end for you so you can read the full articles if you're interested, but this was a really great systematic review that they did recently, and it was talking about the effects of screen time on children and adolescents. And it's important to note that the systematic review was of a ton of studies that they've done over the past 10 plus years, and they put it all together to create these bulk pieces of information. So we're talking about obesity. There's consistent evidence across the board that there's a high association between screen time and greater adipose tissue. So what that means is the more screen time kids and adolescents are allowed to have or do have, the increase in BMI or obesity standards. This is especially true with TV viewing time, even more than computer work or tablet work. It's really that sedentary, non-break time that creates this problem. The next thing is mental health. So we're going to talk more about ways to combat some of the mental health issues, anxiety, depression that could be occurring with the isolation effects as well as the screen time. But there were a good amount of studies that reported higher depressive symptoms that were associated with 2+ hours of screen time a day. Now, in this context, we have to think outside of the school screen time because that's something that we can't help. So we have to think about the additional screen time that we're allowing children to have. And then the scary one that I think is most important outside of these objective measures is the students or the children and adolescents reporting of their quality of life. There was a really positive association across the board between screen time and poor psychological well-being and perceived quality of life. So these children are reporting that they are unhappy, that they're depressed, that they have this understanding of their life that is a negative quality. So it's stuff that, you know, we don't realize that our children are being affected by, and it's something that they're reporting. Almost 80 to 90% of the studies were showing that. So here are the screen time guidelines by age. Again, when we talk about these, we have to consider we are in a very unique circumstance. These are done by the pediatric governing bodies, as well as all of the medical bodies and the psychiatric boards. But, you know, they're not considering a global pandemic where we're in school 5 to 10 hours per day, depending on what their structures are like. So understand that, you know, we're going to give you the information, but obviously this is outside of those times. So like I said, it is hard to balance this screen time because you're caring for yourself, you're working, you're taking care of the family, your house, and you're doing the best you can. So do what you need to do, but do the best you can with the screen time guidelines. Some ideas or examples of this is trying to rotate toys. We all have bins and bins of toys where the kids aren't really touching them. So grab some new stuff, put it in their forefront, and they're gonna say, oh, I forgot I had this train, or oh, that's a cool doll I forgot I had. And they might play with it a little bit more and be more likely to look in that direction versus trying to get to the screen. So just to note, when we're looking at the guidelines, really in that school age, preschoolers really up to an hour a day, elementary aged 1 to 1.5 hours, middle school up to 2 hours. But really the best way to enforce these things is for everybody in the family to limit themselves to less than 2 hours a day. If they're seeing us on our phones scrolling through Facebook for 2 hours, they're going to want to do the same thing. So it's important to show it as much as we're telling them they have to do it. Okay, so we're going to get into some numbers that are interesting and relatively new. They put together, again, a systematic review of about 61 studies, including about 51 or 52,000 participants. And they found a very clear association between loneliness and mental health problems in children and adolescents. Loneliness was associated with future mental health problems for up to 9 years later. So they put together these studies in relation to COVID-19, but they weren't necessarily studies based on COVID-19. They were just putting this together as a way to let folks understand where we're at now because of the isolation that's occurring in children and adolescents in greater propensity than it had been in years prior. So what they did find was the strongest association with mental health issues was with depression. They were consistent across the studies of children, adolescents, and young adults. And there were some gender differences, including that loneliness was more strongly associated with elevated depression symptoms in girls and elevated social anxiety in boys. So looking at the difference in the way that they're reacting to this isolation is important, and you can't treat them all the same. The length of that loneliness that they're reporting also appears to be a predictor of future mental health problems. So we want to consider that not only is this a short-term problem, but we have to put some tools into place so that this doesn't become a long-term issue for our children. Now, this is also in particular relevance to the pandemic because politicians and governing bodies are considering the length of time that schools should remain closed for health reasons, but also they have to consider the mental health concerns that are going to be associated with this, as well as even the implementation of social distancing within schools. So just because they're in school doesn't mean that they don't feel isolated in their 6-foot bubble. So those are types of things that we have to consider, that just because we're sending them to school, it doesn't feel normal, and we have to find ways for them to feel normal daily. There were a couple studies that examined mental health problems after these enforced isolations or quarantines in previous pandemics or different concerns. And these children that had experienced it were 5 times more likely to require mental health service input and experience higher levels of post-traumatic stress in years later. So it does suggest that current social distancing measures enforced because of this new pandemic could lead to an increase in mental health problems as well as possible post-traumatic stress in years to come. But understand your children, understand your own anxieties and stressors, and realize that your children will feed off of that. But also understand that children are pretty resilient, and they see that we're trying to do our best, and they see you're trying to do your best. And I think that they can understand that to a certain extent. And so they feed off of that, and they feel like trying harder too. Now, do understand that schools and local townships do have a lot of resources. Most school districts have mental health counselors. I know Monmouth and Middlesex County have emergency counselors, mental health, telehealth is always an option. So there are more options than ever, and the accessibility to that is very prevalent. So how do we combat all of the negatives of the isolation? Those are staggering and they're scary, but how do we fight that? And so I think, your children are used to a lot of social contact at school. So we definitely feel the effects of being distanced from that, whether they're in school and 6 feet apart or at home. So even if it's not safe for your kids to see their friends, or if you don't feel comfortable with it, I think allowing them to interact online beyond text messages and social media is important. Video chats are the closest thing right now to seeing somebody in person, and it's a great way to get social time in without endangering your children, your family, or others. So allow them to video chat, and you can speak with other parents to set up these like video chat play dates. Also create small groups or families, and I think people are calling them pods now, of people where you feel comfortable, you're all kind of doing the same type of quarantining, distancing, you all are following the same kind of guidelines, and you haven't been outside of your little bubble of people. Those are great resources and great places where your children can spend some time with people in real life. Every parent has a kid right now that is at home going through a new experience, and they're probably really frustrated. We talk to a lot of kids who are saying, I just want to go back to school, I just want it to be normal, I want to see my friends. I think it's important to check in with other parents to see what they found effective for their children, but also check in with what they found effective for them. It's not just the kids that are stuck at home, it's us too. So it's not just finding relationships with their peers, it's finding relationship with your peers. Friends of your kids are probably people that you can chat with and use to offload some of those frustrations, share some victories, and really help each other through the process. I think this is also really important in older students. Maybe find some friends that are math teachers or doctors or whatever the case might be in a subject that you're not super familiar with, where your kids might need a little bit more help. And it could be a cool situation to trade off some of that information. If you're a big reader and you have a degree in English and you can really help somebody get through their Shakespeare section, great. So use your tools and use your friends' tools as well. And then there are some really cool fun activities that you can do via Zoom or meetups online that I think have helped, right? So I've heard of a bunch of kids, young kids, they like playing with Legos. Well, if you know your friend has that same Lego set, let the kids build them together, let them talk it through, or even playing games together. Guess Who, Battleship, things where they can interact, where they can set up their own boards and still play as if they're playing together in real life is going to be important. It's not only engaging in a fun activity, but it gives you some time to rest and walk away from them while they're maintaining their relationships, troubleshooting issues, and they're learning interpersonal skills that won't be taught with text messaging. Some other great ideas is use family members and friends who really want to spend some time with your kids to do fun projects. So if you have an Aunt Samantha who's a great artist, call it drawing time with Aunt Samantha and get them to walk them through drawing, an elephant this week or coloring a same project. They can develop a sense of accomplishment when the project is complete, but also it gives you a little bit of, some time to walk away, do what you need to do. Also, it lets them see some family members or friends that they may not be able to see. You might have some folks across the country, or even just some people who are in the state but not willing to be in a situation where they're face-to-face with people. So I think that's important as well. And then utilize apps and technology to your advantage. I think it's important to use the things that you can to your advantage. And I mean this in a way of, we're talking about reducing screen time, but if you are going to use screens, use them the right way. So like I have nephews who won't sit still on a FaceTime call, but if you read them a book, or we have apps where they can do funny faces and they'll do that for a half hour with my parents. Like it keeps them busy and it keeps them out of my brother's hair and it gives them time to rest, but it also lets your family, your parents, your grandparents allow spend some time with them. So think of things like that. Okay, and then setting up the workspace. We're gonna go into specifics about this, but most adults have some sort of area in your home where you do work, whether it's a home office or you've created a little nook for yourself to work from home. But it's important that you create a similar space for your child. Your child will achieve their best work when in a quiet, comfortable, and dedicated space, and it has to be strictly devoted to learning, just like a classroom would be. This space should be a different setup than where they normally play games or watch television, and they may have separate areas or separate furniture that they know is their school furniture. So we're going to talk a little bit about that workspace setup. So I like this graphic, and it's a pretty simple formula. It is comfort equals concentration and contentment. If your children have furniture that's shaped to support their body's best posture, then they can stay focused on their work or their play that's in front of them. So you want to determine the best chair height by seating your child on a surface where their knees are at 90 degrees and their feet are flat on the floor. The distance from the floor to the seating surface is the chair height that you want. So figuring out what that chair height is going to be, and then you can either create a chair height that's appropriate, and I'll show you a video of how to use like pillows and even shoe boxes to prop up their feet, or looking into smaller structures that are built for them. So to determine the correct chair and table height, you always want to start with the chair height. It's the most important calculation you can make. So if your child's feet are flat on the floor, their knees want to be bent to 90 degrees, then you have the correct chair for ergonomic, comfortable seating. The chart here is going to give you some recommendations, but it's really depending on your child's height. It's based on the average height for the years. Again, I'll put up the link for this so you can see you can access this, but it's just going to give you some general guidelines, but again, depending on your child's size. And then you want to pick a table to match your chair. So in most cases, tabletops should be about 8 inches above the chair seat so that the table and the chair can work together at the correct posture. There's a little leeway for like toddler age, preschool age children, just because their body shapes are gestures, but that's the general rule of thumb with that. And then with their computer height, you want to make sure that their eye level is on line with the text of the monitor. Their hands and wrists are straight and they're not up or down. And you want to make sure that their shoulders are down and their arms are relaxed at their sides. Their elbows should be level with the keyboard, and then again, having their feet and their low back supported. So we're going to show you a video where Dr. Lily, who's one of our doctors of physical therapy, is positioning her son at an adult-sized desk where he's a little bit too short and a little bit too far away, and how she corrects that with use of pillows, and I think just like a ream of paper.
Hi, my name is Leonard J, Doctor of Physical Therapy at ProFysio Physical Therapy, and I'm here with you today to show you some good positions for homeschooling while the kids are in their desks. So this is Andrew, and he's slouching over, which is a common position for the kids, and sometimes they even hunched over, and that's another common position that will put a lot of stress on the neck, on the back. And now I'm going to show you what you can do just to fix this position to make it a little bit better for them. So you can use the pillow and put in the back to help him sit up a little bit. And if you can see, his feet is dangling. You need a support on the floor to make yourself to be able to sit straight and not slouch forward. So you can use anything. I'm using a box of his toys, and we'll put it under his feet, and this way he will be in a much better position.
And then we're also going to show you some alternative positions, and then I'm going to give you some tools for that as well.
Hi, I'm Dr. Leonard J at ProFysio Physical Therapy.
This city is so pretty.
I'm here to show you today some alternative positions for your kids while they're homeschooling. I showed you the desk before, and now I want to show some different ways, because we know that kids moving around and they get tired of one position, so they can change and do something different. So you can use a TheraBall, just like Andrew's using, and this is great for kids who are fidgety and likes to move, and they can move and change positions slowly. So I'll show you another alternative right here. This is great to work on their core strengthening. They can stay on their knees using a chair or something else that you have. He can sit back on his heels. Very good. And with that, he's changing positions also. And now, another alternative would be lying on the floor, where they will stay on their elbows and be able to type. And this is alternatives to change and to make the kid to be comfortable and be able to do everything they have to do.
Okay, so Lily did a great job of explaining a couple of things there. So first of all, using the desk, the pieces that you have at home in order to set up your kid at the right height. So most kids don't fit in adult chairs, just like these ergonomic chairs are fit specifically for you when you're in these, you know, these big office buildings where they get everything set up to your height, your seat height, your arm height. We have to do the same thing for kids. When their heads are down and they're looking down, or if they're looking up like this, it puts a lot of stress on their neck and back. The same thing when they're slouched in a chair. It puts too much stress. They're not working on their stabilizing muscles, and kids need to move, right? Kids don't like to sit in one place all day. We don't like to sit in one place all day. I tell my adult patients every single day, at least 2 times an hour, get up and take a lap. And why do we do that? Because everybody, as the day goes on, they start with nice, good posture, and as they continue, we end up here because it's lazy and it's easy, and that's what gravity does to our bodies. So you need to get up, move, turn those muscles back on. Same thing with kids. The reason they have circle time, the reason they have recess, the reason they have these different moving classes throughout the day, they have their gyms, they have their music classes, is to get them out of that seated position. We call it flex position, where they're just kind of always in that compressed position. It's terrible for everybody's bodies, nevertheless these growing bodies. We want them to be flexible for many years to come, so it's really important to give them some alternatives to seating. So some of those alternatives, I'll show you some photos of: physio balls, ergonomic stools, floor rockers, peanut balls, bean bags, portable lap desks. I do, in the resource section, have a link to purchase some of these stuff. It all came from one website that is instructional for teachers, actually, that I think it gives you some options for cost and things, but just some options for you to look into. I wouldn't go out and buy one of everything, but you know, having an alternative position. So physio balls and these ergonomic stools are really forcing kids to work on their posture, sit nice and upright, engage their core muscles in a different way. It also, like Lily mentioned in her video, it allows them to be a little bit fidgety. Kids aren't used to sitting still. I can't tell you how many kids I have here where we make everything a game because it's boring for them to do 3 sets of 10. I would never ask a kid to sit in front of a computer for 2 hours, and I just don't think it's fair to their little brains and bodies. They need to keep moving. So letting them sit on a ball and bounce and get some of that gross motor, you know, impact, but also some difference in sensation. They like having that structure. Kids like to spin for a reason. It's challenging their vestibular system. The physio balls and these stools are really challenging their core stability, and also letting them get out a little bit of energy, even if it's just a little bit of bouncing. So don't stop them from doing that stuff. These floor rockers are cool. They're a cool option. They don't take up a lot of space. It's something you can tuck under. You can use them for traditional seating. You can have them working on computers in this position, but you can also have them just kind of sitting there and reading. These peanut balls we use a lot for kids that can't traditionally sit on a stability ball, whether they have low tone or even they're just a little bit too fidgety or even just a little bit too young. They're shaped like a peanut, so they don't tip over the way they would tip over on a stability ball or a physio ball, but it gives you some alternative seating. But the same thing, it works on their strength. So you can let them play on it, let them bounce, let them fall, let them roll around in it. It's going to help not only keep them a little bit more active throughout the day, but it's going to give them some alternatives to that flexion position. Let them roll backwards over it, where they're stretching through their core, they're stretching through their chest muscles, their hip muscles, all of those things that traditionally are seated and you're very much contained. And then bean bags and portable laptop chairs. I've seen some really cool bean bags that are actually like stuffed animal storage. When I was searching some of this stuff, you could put like 200, 100 to 200, depending on the size bean bag, of stuffed animals in there. And so it's a great storage solution for kids that refuse to kind of give up those stuffed animals, but also they're always close by, they're always there for them. And then it's a really comfy space where they can read, they can lounge, they can take a little nap and just relax if they need to. Some kids just need some downtime. If your kids say, hey, I need 5 minutes, give them 5 minutes. They might just need to turn everything off for a few minutes. And then these portable lap desks, again, are relatively inexpensive, and they just give you another seating structure. They can kneel at them, they can sit in this crisscross position, so you just have some alternatives to that. And then, like we showed in the video, laying what we call prone, so on their stomachs, that reduces a lot of that flexion. Supine, where they're laying on their backs in that cross-legged or kneeling position. And then I like to discuss what we call like ABC positioning. So you spend the majority of their day in A. Their A is going to be their desk, right? They're sitting in their chair, they're properly set up ergonomically, they're watching their videos with their teachers or their students, and then your B might be that ball, or it might be that ergonomic stool. And then C might be the place that they spend the least amount of time, but for them, that's the time that they need. So it might be that beanbag that they sprawl out on. Or your kid might like tummy time or belly time even into elementary and middle school age. Let them do it. It's not where they're going to spend the bulk of their day on their computer and their true learning. You want them to have very structured learning setups, but you want to have alternative positions and different options for them throughout the day. So here are some photos: prone, again, face down, supine, laying on their backs. It could be on a beanbag, it could be on the floor, it could be on the couch, whatever it might be. But again, you want to make sure that these, if they're doing learning, strict learning activities, they're in their A position. If they're doing some of these secondary learning activities, reading, following up, coloring, they can be in these alternative positions. These are not bad positions to even do some learning in. They might just need to get out of that chair. These are a little bit more engaged positions because you have to engage your core. You have to engage your stabilizer muscles in order to maintain an upright position in these different cross-legged and half kneeling positions. So don't be afraid to let them do some computer work at a low table, or like Lily showed, in a chair on the computer in a kneel or a half kneel position. It might just be more comfortable for them. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about exercise, but I do have another poll question for everybody. So how many minutes per day are you and your family engaged in exercise? We'll give everybody a few minutes.
Great. So it looks like we are 38% under 30 minutes and 63% are between 30 and 60 minutes.
Okay. So everybody's kind of in that same time frame. I think it really depends on the structure of your learning day as well as your work schedules, right? Not everybody has bulk amounts of time where they can engage in very specific exercise. But, you know, when we're talking about the real guidelines, the medical guidelines, is children 3 to 5 years old really should be able to engage in as much physical activity and have as many opportunities throughout the day to play. These are likely kids that are in preschool or, you know, daycares and things like that, where they are just playing most of the day. They're engaging in a lot of activities with other children or even peers and family members, where they're getting a lot of that energy out. From 6 to 17 years old, the recommendation is that they should get at least 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous intensity activity, mostly aerobic. Most kids are not doing that. So more than 60 minutes of where their heart rates are elevated, where they're possibly sweating a little bit, turning a little pink or red in the face, that's where we're looking at that moderate to vigorous intensity. And so that's a long time. They're usually getting some of that in a gym class and then some of that with sports after school. If we are eliminating gym class and we're eliminating sports after school, we have to find other ways for them to do that. And then muscle and bone strengthening is recommended at least 3 days per week. So that's weight-bearing exercise where they're engaging the muscles that are going to help with their growth of bone and muscle. So you want to increase the amount and the intensity over time. We were all locked up for a few months. We couldn't do a whole lot. A lot of people were doing a lot of walking and hiking, and all of that is wonderful. And I think it's important that we get back to it, especially now that it's not going to be 100 degrees every day. Also, take some opportunities to learn some new tools, because they're taking away a lot of these gym programs and these learning structures. Find some online programming where you might be able to work with your kids or teach them, or have some peers work with them. You might have a neighbor whose kid loves soccer and he's in high school, he's not gonna be able to play, but he might be a great instructor for your 5-year-old. So finding people in your neighborhood that you're comfortable with and working through some of these exercises. So we'll talk about some of the program things. So stretching, yoga, dance classes, martial arts, gymnastics, strength training, and of course your sports, so your soccers and footballs and all the things that happen in the fall. Now these are programmed because they have structure to them. They have a beginning, middle, and end. They're usually a certain length of time. There are some really cool apps out there, as well as school exercise programs. Go Noodle is an app. I think it's a relatively nominal monthly fee. There's also Cosmic Kid Yoga that's on YouTube. It keeps your attention, but it gives you a little bit of break from them, and they're doing something physical. Even if it's in front of a screen, it's a little bit different because they're not focusing on the screen as much as they are on their physical activity. But then there are some free-form things. So letting them ride their bike, letting them go for a run. I know I was talking to somebody recently and they said, when my kid gets home, I tell them to take 3 laps before they're allowed to come in the house. Just burn out some of that energy before they go back to their learning structure. So figure out what works for your kid. I'm going to show you a video of a couple of kind of fun, different exercises that you might have your kid do, where you say, okay, hey, listen, you need to take a break. Might be a mental break, might be a physical break. They might need to just burn a little energy. You'll be able to tell. Say, okay, give me 3 laps of bear crawls or 4 laps of skipping, and just kind of figure that out for your kid and have fun with it. You know, make it fun. You do it with them or have them do it on their own, whatever you're more comfortable with, but definitely stuff that's safe for kids, it's fun for them, and it's a little bit different than just sitting in a chair. All right, so some options for you as far as getting some exercise in throughout the day and breaking it up a little bit. So some fine motor skills you hear a lot about with teachers, and there's a reason kids are using a lot of these different tools at school. It's because we want to improve their coordination between the small muscles of their hands and fingers, as well as improve the small muscles of their body. Sorry, I lost you for a second. Okay, so engaging those small muscles of their hands and working on the small muscles of the body that are important for writing, grasping small objects, fastening clothing, and there's plenty of ways to strengthen those muscles and practice coordination and develop hand-eye coordination. So here are some just homemade activities using Play-Doh, pasta necklaces, pipe sorting. It's stuff you have at home. It's just stuff you can use to engage those fine motor skills. And then for tweens and teens, try to make it more interesting. Puzzles, jewelry, bracelets, learning musical instruments, all of these things are going to help with their dexterity and fine motor skills. So baking, cooking, anything that's giving them different tactile enforcement as well. So there's a lot of importance for those fine motor skills. It's important in daily activities, being able to button a button, unlock your doors, select coins from a wallet, anything that's sensory and tactile in that nature. So it's really important to reduce the like texting, writing, and mouse work, and use more hand writing, cutting, piping, that kind of stuff. So you want to use play with puzzles, train tracks, doll dressing, self-care with tying shoelaces, zipping things, and then visual perception where they're actually seeing something and moving those skills. So you want to make sure that if your child does have any difficulty with fine motor, so you'll see with avoidance or disinterest in those finger skills, they may prefer physical activity to doing these handheld tasks. They may have no interest in pencils or scissors. They might be bossy when they're playing with other kids saying, hey, draw this for me, and they won't do it themselves. Waiting for their parents to dress them, brush their teeth, those types of things, or refusing to use a stylus when working on like an iPad or a computer. And then we're going to talk about spatial relationships. So this is known as visual spatial intelligence, and it's the ability to imagine or visualize in their minds the positions of the shapes and like where they're going to fit. So these block games are something that you see for younger children, but it's important, especially with learning math, that they're able to take those geometric object shapes, figure out the measurement, where it can be moved and transformed to facilitate that calculation and pattern recognition. So a lot of mathematicians and engineers will use these daily, and you don't realize we do it as well. Even as, packing luggage and being able to visualize where in the suitcase we're putting things. So some preschool tools are going to be relative positioning. So children learn better when spatial relationships are given names. So when you use words like triangle, big, tall, bent, they perform better in spatial testing than children who don't. So understanding where things are in relationship to each other, but also size, dimension, shape. Some elementary tools that you see are these tanagrams. They're like building blocks, and they teach them about geometric terms. So they are able to work on higher level problem solving. So it's basic arithmetic, and that's the idea of it, but it's essentially 7 pieces that form this square, and then they can take those squares and create other things. You see a house and a fish. And so using things like these tanagrams, they're relatively inexpensive. You can make them with paper and pencil, or even Legos, wooden blocks. It just helps to improve their spatial thinking ability. And you really don't need perfectly crafted tools. You can use cereal boxes that they can stack and build interesting structures, and then give them problems to solve with it. Then when we're talking about older children, middle school, this is map reading. If they're really a game kind of kid, marble games, Tetris games, things that have been able to help them understand spatial awareness, and it's going to help them understand those like more abstract concepts of space and understand spatial relationships as to what directional things are happening. I'm gonna quickly just review backpack safety. I'm sure you've all heard a million things about backpacks. We just wanna make sure everybody is on the same page. I've heard also from families that the children that are going back and forth to school are required to bring their Chromebooks or computers and laptops and iPads or tablets or whatever they're using back and forth, which can be very heavy. So you want to make sure that they're using 2 straps to weight bear appropriately so that it's not just pulling down one side of the body. You want to pay close attention to the position, and it should rest really evenly in the middle of their back, and then the shoulder strap should be adjusted to allow them to take it on and off without difficulty but still move their arms. But you don't want it to be so low that the backpack is extending below their low back. And you want to keep the weight to 10 or 15% or less of their body weight. So if they're required to carry heavy items like their laptop, you want to look for a lighter weight bag. Organize the heaviest items closest to their back and then work out from there. Now, if you do have a child who is smaller or they're required to carry a lot of heavy things, look for backpacks with wheels, and many of the hybrid students that are doing this remote learning can either leave their laptops at school if they have one at home, and you can discuss that with the teachers. Okay, so we're gonna discuss some healthy eating options. Now, all of this information is on choosemyplate.gov. It's got a ton of great resources, and we're just gonna briefly discuss some alternatives and some options, give you some snack options, but I really, really urge you, if you're kind of stuck in this category, to go to the website, read a little bit more about the details of the MyPlate, and then they have tons of meal prep options. They actually have like weeks of meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, all prepped out there with recipes for you. So it's stuff you don't even have to think about. You do want to understand that you don't have to serve all of the food groups at every meal. And listen, kids aren't getting carrots for breakfast unless your kids really love carrots. So you want to think of the plate as an entire day's worth of eating, and then try to fill that day, that plate throughout the day. So you'll see the green is the vegetables. So you want to stick with a nice variety of vegetables. The red is going to be the fruits. Again, it's about about a half of the plate is going to be fruits and vegetables, and then you get into your grains. So it's really important that your grains are including whole grains, so oatmeals, brown rices, whole wheat breads, because they have this dietary fiber that helps them to feel full and helps prevent and treats any constipation, especially with the limited activities that these kids are having. So you want to have a rich diet of whole grains to help reduce chances of heart disease, chronic conditions like diabetes, but also reduce the amount of refined grains because it just pulls out the nutrients from those grains. The purple are going to be your proteins. So you want to find nice, clean proteins: beef, poultry, seafood, beans, peas, eggs, nuts, seeds, and then some soy products, tofu, veggie burgers. When they're eating the meats, you want to choose lean or low fat options. You don't want to get these very fatty cuts, especially for children. And then milk, dairy products. So milk products including yogurts and cheese, you want to make sure it's calcium fortified if they are doing soy milk, so that it can be included in that group. And then any child over 2 years old can have low fat or non-fat milk. So MyPlate has what they call their champions. So these are just some tricks and tips to engage your children and reduce that. So again, do whole grains, reduce the amount of sugary drinks, add sparkling waters to some apple juices instead of soda. So having some alternative options, and then be as active as possible. So here is their MyPlate breakfast guide. And so their recommendations are really to just make some small changes that impact brain and body healthy food choices. So if you swap out a yogurt and a muffin for a fresh fruit parfait, let's say, you're saving about 300 calories and you're reducing your sugars by about 10 times. You're also reducing your sodiums by 50% and your saturated fats by up to 6 grams. So when we're thinking about these alternatives, they don't take much more time, if any, but it's just something to get used to thinking about. Same thing with lunch. If your kid loves peanut butter and jelly, like every kid on the planet, take that peanut butter and jelly, swap it out for a peanut butter and banana sandwich, and add a side of carrots or celery or whatever they might like that day. It reduces your calories by about 300, reduces your sugars by over 10 grams, and then your saturated fats and sodiums by about half, just by changing it that little bit. But like I said, that choosemyplate.gov has great menu items. They have great weekly menus, including breakfast, lunch, dinners, and snacks, and then tons of these serving suggestions or ways to make things just a little bit healthier. And then with snacks, you want to save time by slicing veggies and change it, mix it up. So do some mixed dried fruits, salts, nuts, popcorns, but keep them in a snack size bag for an easy to use or easy to grab snack. Sometimes giving them an option of having a glass of milk, lean proteins, and having snacks prepared and easily available. So some parents have suggested that they pack a lunch bag the same way that they would if the kids were going to school. Here's your snack for the day, or they have a snack bin in their kitchen and they say, these are your choices for the week, choose wisely. And it allows them to have convenient size foods. They are already pre-portioned, so you're not concerned about portion control, and then you can have some variety in their diet for the week. The picky eaters of the group. Let your kids help pick out the produce for the week. Let them pick out some fruit and veggies that they like, and then pick one new thing that they want to try every week. You want to give them options and not just say, do you want broccoli? You want to say, do you want broccoli or cauliflower? And then make sure you're trying new things too. So don't be afraid to say, hey, I don't really love cauliflower, but this week we're going to try cauliflower as a family. They're more likely to get involved and not reject the new foods if they see everybody trying them. So you want to do small portions of new foods that they might enjoy, and then let them smell, taste, test it. And then when they develop for more tastes of foods, it's easier to plan these meals. You don't want to offer a ton of new foods at one time. Pick one thing that they like, one thing that they don't like, and that's how you're going to progress that. And then also offer those new foods first. So when your child is most hungry, they're more likely to try something new than once they're already kind of full, they don't want any part of it. And then sleep, the all-important sleep. So this is really important. We're gonna look at just a quick chart of the recommendations by the American Medical Association and the Pediatric Association, but children ages 6 to 13 need 9 to 12 hours of sleep. At the same time, those are the kids where they have more schoolwork, they have more activities, they have more sports and social events. So in addition to that, they are also becoming more involved in TVs and social medias and computers and internet, as well as these caffeine products. We're giving in a little bit more on having a soda or something sugary than when they were younger age. So it is important to reduce caffeine late in the day, reduce a lot of physical activity late in the day, and then reduce the amount of TV that they're watching later in the day. It's all associated with bedtime resistance, difficulty falling asleep, anxiety around sleep, and then inevitably sleeping for fewer hours. So sleep problems and disorders are really prevalent in that pre-middle school age. And poor and inadequate sleep can lead to these mood swings, behavioral problems with ADHD, cognitive problems, and it really impacts their ability to learn in school and in this new school environment. Now, you know your kids. Different kids respond differently to sleep. Some act out, some just get tired and shut down. So you have to recognize what it is that they might need. It might be a break, it might be a nap, or it might just be overall increased sleep time. And you have to know for your kid exactly what you're looking at. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lenny. He's going to talk through a couple of slides of mindfulness and stress reduction to help with some of those effects of isolation and stress and anxiety that everybody's going through.
Great. Thank you, Nichole. So yeah, the next couple of slides, we're going to, we'll take a moment to define stress. We'll discuss how chronic stress, some of the pathophysiologic changes that happen and occur in the brain as a result of chronic stress. And we'll introduce the concept of mindful awareness and mindful meditation so that we can learn to use that as a strategy for both, ourselves as parents and adults, helping our children through the remote learning process, and also help our children with that as well. There's some great tools and references and resources for them as well. So let's define stress. One research study defined it. This is a great definition. Stress is an umbrella term meant to express the experience when a person is exposed to a stimulus and judges it to be a threat he or she cannot manage. So I don't know about you guys, but I think in 2020, that's definitely a definition that resonates with me. I think we're all going through some stuff right now that we may see as a threat, and we may see as difficult to manage. Case in point, having to have our kids at home and remote learning for the first time. This is new to all of us. So it's easy to imagine how it's been a stressful time and how it can be. But I think, with some of the things we've introduced here, some of the great points Dr. Nichole has made about nutrition and sleep and exercise, these are all things that help contribute to managing stress properly. Mindfulness and mindful meditation is another one of these tools. So I think, why is it important to properly manage stress, and looking at some of those changes that happen in the brain underscores the importance of managing, why that's important. Chronic stress results in persistent changes in brain circuits that shift behavior from reflective and flexible to reactive and habitual regulation. This primarily happens in the cortical limbic system. Basically the negative effects that happen in the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus lead to us sort of acting in a way where we react habitually and sort of fire from the hip instead of thinking more rationally and intellectually and planning and trying to coordinate how we're going to manage the different stressors and different inputs in our life. And that's been shown in research. For example, in the amygdala, where we typically assign emotion to a sensory input, when there's chronic stress present, what we find is sort of a hyperactivity of the amygdala, or you might think of it as sort of an increased emotionality. And you also see that in the prefrontal cortex, there's less control of the amygdala. So again, I think under chronic stress situations can tend to, I think of it as sort of firing from the hip and reacting habitually, as opposed to using higher level thinking, abstract thinking, and things like that. So as physical therapists, we see a lot of our patients struggle with chronic pain. And so we see some of the correlation in clinical practice between chronic pain and chronic stress. And while today's presentation and the focus is more on managing stress, I think it's important to mention chronic pain just because there's so many of the changes that happen at the brain level are very similar in both instances, and they sort of contribute to one another. Similar changes are seen in the brain in both instances, and the presence of chronic stress increases the negative effects of chronic pain. There was a very interesting study that I'll summarize quickly here. They did a rodent model study, and what the researchers did was they induced a chronic pain situation by constricting the sciatic nerve in the rodent model. They also created a situation where they increased the stress for the rodent by immobilizing it, right? They want to move around, and so you can induce stress by immobilizing the animal. And then, of course, you have a control group where none of these things occurred. And basically what they looked at and found out was that at 4 weeks, there's decreased hippocampal neurogenesis, which is essentially formation of healthy nervous tissue, and that is significantly exacerbated with the immobilization-induced stress. And so from that, you can extrapolate and see how the chronic stress sort of accentuates and exacerbates the effects of chronic pain. So it's something important to note as well, because I know a lot of folks out there deal with things like chronic low back pain, and again, we see it in the clinic so often. I think looking at the effects of stress hormones as well. So we know that the effects of elevated levels of stress hormones have damaging effect also on the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, and hippocampus, and can lead to sort of a dysregulation of those stress hormones in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal index. Say that, adrenal. Say that 10 times fast, I was going to say. It's getting late. And so we know it also has negative effects. So I think these three slides, and the point is to, again, underscore the importance of having a plan and strategies that you have to manage stress, right? Not just sort of take the approach of I'm just going to grit and bear it, because really it just doesn't work. And it has very real cellular changes for us as human beings. So mindfulness, awareness, and meditation. So let's define mindful awareness. The awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding experience moment by moment, moment by moment. I like to think of it as really just being in the moment, right? Paying attention to the different sensory inputs in a non-judgmental way, not trying to, agree or disagree with those, with that sensory input. Mindful meditation is the deliberate training in mindful awareness. So we can further describe mindful awareness as the following: observation of sensory experience. And if when you try different guided meditations, you'll see that there are different types of guided meditations that will focus on sensations such as taste, sight, touch, smell, and sound. The observation of thoughts and emotions as a function of the guided meditation, and what it's guiding you to think about. A stable and unwavering quality of attention, and independent of agreeable, disagreeable, or neutral nature of these events. So again, that's the non-judgmental part, right? When you practice meditation, if a thought pops into your head, not allowing that to sort of fester and marinate or to make any judgments on it, but rather to try to refocus on the meditation, just follow the instructions. Some of the benefits of mindful meditation: a systematic review, so a large study of that basically puts together findings from other previous large studies and meta-analysis of mindful meditation for chronic pain findings, found that mindfulness meditation improves pain, depression, and quality of life in chronic pain patients. So some of the proposed mechanisms and other benefits, attention regulation. And so there's research that shows that practicing mindful meditation can improve attention on desired targets, basically improve attention span, and helps us disregard distractions. There's also research that suggests that by a means of body awareness, and we see that some in clinical practice, that folks that engage in this type of meditation have a better sense of body, a better sense of posture, a better sense of what they feel. They have an improved ability to relax muscles or sense tension in certain muscle groups, because they are, for lack of a better phrase, more in tune with their body. There are guided meditations that take you through essentially head to toe and the different sensations that you're experiencing head to toe. And by engaging in that practice, you become, sort of innately more in tune with what it is that you're feeling. We see in chronic pain patients that it helps stage off exacerbation. So if you're more in tune with how you feel and what that means, it's easier to know, and prevent exacerbations. Emotional regulation. So there's research suggests that it leads to enhanced emotional regulation, improved mood, and reduced anxiety. And I think a change in perspective as well. It's the change in perspective that while we may feel a certain emotion or we may feel a certain sensory input, we're not defined by that sensory input. We're just aware of it. So some different practice options. There are guided versus unguided meditation. Guided is essentially somebody walking you through what it is you should be thinking about, depending on the form of meditation that you're engaging in. Headspace is listed in the resources in the last slide. It's a great resource. We've listed a few resources there that have some free options of things that you can follow, or a guided practice that you can follow. Body scan I found is a popular one. We mentioned that one before, as it relates to being more in tune with your body. So you're syncing body and mind by performing a mental scan from head to toe and paying attention to and focusing on that sensory input from head to toe and how you feel in different areas of the body. Another called loving kindness, so direct positive energy and goodwill first to ourselves and then on to others. And focused attention, so focusing on your breathing. I did a sleep meditation last night and slept like a baby. This is something that I've definitely adopted myself, both personally and in clinical practice, and I've found to be very, very effective. just a great way to reduce stress, and just another tool I think in the toolbox, an important one under what are very challenging circumstances right now. So a couple of resources I think in the end that I just wanted to reference. CarolynMcManus.com. We have some time for questions still. She's a doctor of physical therapy and an expert in mindful awareness and mindful meditation. She's got some free guided meditations. She actually launched some Zoom-based, completely free meditations during COVID, I think, to help people out, which I think was fantastic. She also has some things you can download as well and references. Headspace.com is a really, really popular one. Does a nice job outlining the different types of meditations you can engage in, and I think gives a lot of options and very reasonably priced, I think. I also listed the third bullet there was a great piece I found in the New York Times that was specifically focused on mindfulness for children. I tried to find some good resources for mindfulness for children because I think it's something fantastic that we can do, with our kids, and we can try to teach them to do as well. So I found that. I also found mindful.org, another good resource, mindfulness for kids. I think this is excellent for them. And I think, it's important to keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a long period of time, right? It can be 5 minutes. I've tried to get into the habit of doing that myself. I used to sort of be in the mindset that I needed to have, 10 or 15 minutes to do this. And I've found that just, when I'm feeling like I'm overwhelmed or I'm very stressed, to do it even 5 minutes in the middle of the day can make a big difference. So I think it can make a big difference for us and our kids. So some good resources there. Check it out. And, hopefully that can be another good tool for you to help manage stress.
Yeah. I also think it's worth mentioning, don't overestimate your children. They're fully capable of doing these mindfulness activities. And like Dr. Lenny said, it doesn't have to be a long period of time. It could be music-based. It could be body scan. It could be all sorts of different sensory things that they just enjoy doing. So find the thing that works best for your children and your family and incorporate them. I think it's just going to help take some of the stress away from their day in addition to some of your days.
Absolutely. All right, so let's launch this poll and then. So we just want to get your feedback for future presentations. So this poll we're going to launch, what topics would you like to hear more information or to see another presentation focus on? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that one while everybody has a chance to answer it. We'll get into some questions in a moment. And again, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. Our intent throughout this process, we started doing a lot more of these during the pandemic, and our intent has been to try to utilize this way of connecting remotely to share information that we think can help people. And so this is a presentation Dr. Nichole and I wanted to give because we felt like from speaking to a lot of patients and some of the research that we've done and some of the experiences that we've had just personally, that we had some good information and good tools to share in the areas like we discussed, workstation setup, mindfulness, which we found to be very effective for our patients who struggle with chronic pain. And again, there's that correlation between chronic stress and chronic pain. We just want to continue to try to deliver as much valuable information as we can for our patients and our friends in the community. So looks like 38% more on exercise. Absolutely. It's a great idea. 38% nutrition. 13% chronic stress and pain, and 63% would like to see more on mindfulness. So definitely something that we can consider for the future, and look to try to deliver more valuable information in those areas. Great. So Nichole, I'll let you wrap up, and then we'll get into questions.
Sure. So we just have a little bit of information just about our clinic. If you're not familiar with us, we do want to let you know we have 5 locations in Monmouth and Middlesex County, Aberdeen, East Brunswick, Edison, Old Bridge, and Homedale. We are offering in-person and telehealth visits. We offer complimentary in-person and video consultations. So if you do have some questions about your workplace setup for yourself or your children, definitely something we can work through, as well as some complimentary transportations depending on location. Like Dr. Lenny said, they've been in practice about 7 or 8 years at this point. So we've definitely really honed in on that clinical excellence, unmatched customer service, and really trying to do the best for our patients. And I think if you kind of watch through some of our videos or check out our website, you'll see, we really focus on our patients and making sure everybody's top of mind here.
Absolutely. So like Dr. Nichole said, and just want to remind everybody, that you can access this webinar on our YouTube page, and please subscribe to our YouTube page. You'll get notifications when we post new content. We put all kinds of valuable information on there. Some of the videos that you saw from Dr. Lilly on ergonomic workstation setup, and things like that. In the event you have acute low back pain, we try to put as much valuable information there as possible for our patients and our friends in the community. So please take a moment to subscribe and follow us there, and please follow us on Facebook as well. We'll rebroadcast this webinar on Facebook Live, and we post a lot of our YouTube videos on there as well. Like we said before, we're a practice that really stresses quality care, so we're about one-on-one physical therapy with a doctor of physical therapy. So let's open it up for questions. I want to thank everybody again for joining us, and let's see what we have for questions. So if you go, so one of the questions is at YouTube, what's the location for the recording? So if you go to YouTube and you just search ProFysio Physical Therapy, you'll hit our YouTube channel. And then from there, you just click on there. You don't have to subscribe, I believe, to see the video, but you should be able to see all of our video content, public content on the YouTube page there. Someone chatted, said we did a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other questions at this time? So Nichole, I thought you did a great job. I really appreciate you. The information you delivered, I thought was awesome. Very practical, very applicable. I'm excited we were able to deliver it to everybody. We'll give another minute here just to see if anybody else has questions right now. More good comments. Everybody says you did a phenomenal job, Nichole.
Thanks.
Great work.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you guys for spending the evening with us. I know it's, just another thing to add to the list of things for your day, but, share it with your friends, even if it's just some info, bits and pieces that you got, or send them to the YouTube page or our Facebook page, just so you can, give them the resources too. We're building communities of helping each other at this point, because it's all we have. So definitely help your friends, help your neighbors, and use this information and ask us as many questions as you need to. So.
Absolutely. Well said, Nichole. Okay, awesome. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for future presentations or any encore of this presentation. Thanks so much, and have a good night.